So today is the Sitientes Saturday, or the Thirsting Saturday, the fourth Saturday of Lent. Good to be back here in Quebec. On this Saturday is a traditional day for the ordination of priests. Many thousands and thousands of priests have been ordained to the priesthood or the various levels of the religious, of the seven holy orders on this day. So the minor orders and the major orders. And so this the day called the Sitientes, or Thirsting Saturday, is a day for the priesthood. And the epistle for the Sitientes Saturday is taken from the book of Isaiah. It's also the feast of St. Patrick. And then taken from Isaiah chapter 49. Thus saith the Lord, in an acceptable time I have heard you. In the day of salvation I have helped you. And I have preserved you and given you to be a covenant of my people, that you might raise up the earth and possess the inheritance that were destroyed, that you might say to those who are bound, come forth, and to those who are in darkness, show yourselves. They shall feed in the ways, and their pastures shall be every plain, and they shall not hunger nor thirst. Neither shall the heat nor the sun strike them. For he who is merciful to them shall be their shepherd, and at the fountains of waters he shall give them drink. And I will make all my mountains I will make all my mountains away, and my paths shall be exalted. Behold, these shall come from afar, and behold, these from the north and from the sea, and these from the south country. Give praise, O ye heavens, and rejoice, O earth. Ye mountains, give praise and with jubilation, because the Lord has comforted his people, and will have mercy on his poor ones. And Zion said, the Lord has forsaken me, and the Lord has forgotten me. Can a woman forget her infant, so as not to have pity on the son of her womb? And if she would forget, yet will not I forget you, saith the Lord Almighty. And the Gospel. Taking that according to St. John chapter 8. At that time Jesus spoke to the multitudes of the Jews, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me does not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. The Pharisees therefore said to him, thou bearest witness to thyself. Thy witness is not true. And Jesus answered and said to them, even if I bear witness to myself, my witness is true, because I know from whence I come, and where I go. But you do not know where I come, from whence I come, or where I go. You judge according to the flesh, I judge no one. And if I do judge, my judgment is true, because I am not alone, but with me is he who sent me, the Father. And in your law it is written, that the witness of two persons is true. It is I who bear witness to myself, and he who sent me, the Father, bears witness to me. They therefore said to him, where is thy Father? And Jesus answered, you know neither me nor my Father. If you knew me, you would know also my Father. And Jesus spoke these words in the treasury while teaching in the temple, and no one seized him, because his hour had not yet come. Those are the words of today's Holy Gospel. Son and Father, Son, Holy Ghost, amen. Well, today is this Sitientes Saturday, and one of the days in which we consider the holiness of the Catholic priesthood. We can consider here the priesthood not only of the New Testament, but even of the Old Testament, and an essential common element of the priesthood. And it's a priesthood that is an element found only in the priesthood in the Catholic Church, and in no other church. And then, of course, also in the Jews of the Old Testament, because remember, the first head of our church was Adam. And the last head of our church will be St. Peter II. And there will be Catholics and followers of Christ who believed in him before his coming, and those who believe in him during the time of his presence here on earth, and those who believe in him after his coming. And these are the assembly of the faithful, the church. And the principal members of that church which maintain that faith and keep it steady throughout the 6,000 years, from the time of Adam until the end of the world, are the priests. They also offer sacrifice, both in the Old Testament and the New. The New Testament priesthood is far more sacred than the Old Testament priesthood, because it is the priesthood according to the order of Melchizedek, which does not end with death, whereas the Old Testament priesthood ended with death. And also, it is a priesthood by which we actually participate in a most sacred manner in the very priesthood of our Lord Jesus Christ himself, which is why it's a perennial and eternal priesthood and cannot end even when we go to heaven. So in any case, what is it that makes the priesthood of the church, the Catholic Church and the true church also of the Old Testament, different from the other priesthoods and different from the other churches? It is the faith. The faith. Those who follow Jesus Christ, those who belong to his church, we call the faithful. Faithful means those that are full of the faith, those who have the faith. And that the priests are those who teach the faith. Remember that when the apostles were going about teaching, they decided in the very beginning to have deacons. The deacons would take care of the table and take care of the material preparations. They would be part of the priesthood, a holy part of the priesthood, but they would take care of the material side of things, and which is part of the priesthood, but a lower part of the priesthood. And then the apostles, the bishops, they would be devoted to teaching. But they would be taking care of the magisterium so that they could be more involved in teaching. Therefore, the priests and the deacons would take care of the teaching also, but would take care of the secondary things. But the bishops, the apostles, devote to teaching, to make sure the faith is preserved. And then we have this Saturday is chosen by the church many centuries ago, over 1,000 years ago, as a Saturday to ordain priests and ordain the various levels of the priesthood: the porter, the lector, exorcist, acolyte, subdeacon, deacon, and the priest himself. And it is called Sitientes Saturday, the thirsting Saturday. And on this day, that's that the Lord, that they're going to come to him and drink. We can look at the scientists look at the human body and the body of other creatures, and they say that we're 97% water. 97% water. In fact, one scientist pointed out recently, this is one of the arguments, or 92% water, whatever it is, 90-something% water. And then so evolutionists say, well, you're 90-something% water. Since you're 90-something% water, then obviously we evolved. And one simple response of a creation scientist is, all right, a cloud is 93% water. A watermelon is 93% water. And a jellyfish is 93% water, and a human being is 93% water. So obviously, they must have turned into each other. So a cloud is 93% water, but it's not quite the same as a jellyfish. Not even similar. A jellyfish is 93% water, but it's not quite the same as a watermelon. And that's not quite the same as a man. And so to say they are mainly water is not enough. So likewise, we can say that religions are primarily teachings and beliefs, but it's not enough. The teachings of religion must be same as what they were before. And it is unique to the Catholic faith that the teaching doesn't change. The other religions have changed their teaching. And that so there is a teaching of the church, a teaching of the faith, and an argument St. Rebellion gives in a discussion about the indefectibility of the church. Well, the church is primarily the assembly of the faithful, and all say it's assembly of the faithful. The Pope must be faithful, but he's the head of the church. And the lowest Catholic must be faithful, and they're at the bottom of the church. And everyone in between must be faithful. It's the assembly of those who have the faith. And so we can see clearly, say some heretics from 500 years ago, early Protestant heretics, that there have been many times the church has failed. First of all, we'll go back to the very beginning. Adam and Eve. Adam sinned, and Eve sinned, and they were the only two people on earth. They were the entirety of humanity, and they were the whole of the church. And so obviously the church failed. And St. Rebellion answers says, no, that's not true. Adam did sin. He ate the forbidden fruit. And Eve did sin. She also ate the forbidden fruit. Not only that, but she encouraged Adam to do it. And they both committed sin, but they did not lose the faith. They knew that God was God, and they accepted his teaching, and they did not teach heresy. They didn't lose the faith. Therefore, the faith maintained in that church when it was at its smallest point of only 2 people. And then they say, well, what other times the church failed? In the time of Noah, the church failed. No, it didn't, because in the time of Noah, although most men on earth turned away from God, including the sons of God, there were the sons of God and the sons of men. And the sons of men abandoned God. They were the children of Cain. But the sons of Seth were the sons of God, and they kept the faith. They kept the belief and the teachings of the faith. But then comes the time of Noah, and almost all of the sons of God abandoned the faith. But did all abandon? No. There was an assembly of the faithful involving Noah, his 3 sons, and their wives. So there were 8 members, and only those 8 who belonged to the faithful survived. Everyone else was wiped out and killed. And so the church survived, and only through the church did mankind survive. So Noah survived. Then we go forward in time. They say, well, no, there was another failing. There are several times when God speaks through prophets in the book of Kings, and in the various sayings of the prophets, all of Israel is turned away from me. There is not a single prophet in Israel that is faithful. And St. Barbellum responds, it's true. He says there's not a single faithful prophet in Israel. But when he said these words, the kingdom of Israel was divided into 2 parts, between Israel, the 10 tribes, and Judah and Benjamin, the 2 tribes. And there was not a single faithful priest or prophet amongst the Israelites, the 10 tribes, but there were faithful prophets amongst the Judah. And so therefore the church did not fail. And they continue all the way through. And then they said, surely the church failed on Good Friday, because on Good Friday only the Blessed Virgin Mary had the faith. And the church equals an assembly of the faithful. And therefore one person cannot be, even as the Mother of God, cannot be the church. So surely there was a time in which there was a failure of faith. The apostles did not believe. And their faith had died. And St. Robert Bellum responds, no, the Blessed Virgin Mary was not the only one who had the faith. First of all those Jews who were scattered throughout the world, who had no knowledge of the meeting of Jesus Christ. We are not yet at the time of Pentecost, where the church is implemented its fullness of authority, and the church of the New Testament is born. This is before Pentecost, 53 days before Pentecost. And so on this day, there were Jews throughout the world who did not go along with the crucifixion of Christ, and who did not want him to be crucified, who did not know about his crucifixion, and therefore maintained the faith. And even amongst those who were involved in the crucifixion of Christ, we see that some of the Pharisees, but some of even the Sanhedrin were disgusted at the proceedings of Caiaphas and Annas, and they did not go along with it. And here it does not mean that they were immoral in the sense they were guilty of sin, but not a complete sin against the faith. For the Catholic Church, from the time of Adam until the very end of the world, must always have some souls, some members who hold the faith. Now, what maintains that faith? It is the sacred priesthood of both the New and Old Testaments. And that this priesthood will never completely suffice. So that there were several priests who either had no knowledge of Christ, because they were in the far-flung lands, they were in Alexandria, or whatever it was, in the time of the crucifixion itself, or were against what was going on with Christ and did not accept the crucifixion of Christ. In that time of the very crucifixion on Good Friday, says St. Robert Bellman. So the Blessed Virgin Mary was, of course, more perfect in her faith and carried the light of faith between the Old and the New Testaments, but there were others who had the faith. The church, the assembly of the faithful, did not fail. And we see also in these examples, he goes through about 8 different examples. We mentioned a few of them there from the Old Testament. And that the church has had many times of crisis, but never a loss of faith. And the same faith is taught. Now let's look at other churches. The Lutherans, for instance, these are the first Protestants. And remember that a religion is 97% water. So we can say that a religion is the Sitientes refers to the faith. So every religion you could say is 93% or 97% faith. 97% teachings. Let's go to the teachings of other religions. For instance, the Lutherans, who came into existence 500 years ago. Now, Martin Luther believed that the Mass was a sacrifice in which the body and blood and the soul and divinity of Jesus Christ was really brought present on the altar, and that he was there along with bread. He believed in the heresy called consubstantiation. And he taught that heresy that Jesus Christ is really and truly present. He said the Mass up until near his death, his own death. And he believed in the real presence of Christ, and he taught the real presence of Christ until he died. Martin Luther would not accept the denial of the presence of Christ. And Martin Luther believed that he was body and blood and soul and divinity present in the Blessed Sacrament, but bread was also really and truly bread, which is why it's called consubstantiation. That is, a substance of bread and the substance of Christ are both present. He also taught that confession was good. Martin Luther taught that confession is recommended and a good thing, and he himself went to confession frequently all the way up until his death. But he believed that confession did not take away sins. So the Lutheran belief is that Christ is really present and bread is really present. A false belief. Christ is really present, but not bread. They believe confession was a good thing, kind of like getting holy water sprinkled on you or something like that. It's a good thing, but it doesn't take away sins, and you don't have to go to confession. But it's recommended as a nice, pious practice to remind you to try to be good, even though you're not supposed to be good. So in any case, there is the teaching of Martin Luther. Now, come 500 years later, is there a Lutheran assembly? Is there a Lutheran church that teaches the same as Martin Luther? The answer is no. The teaching has changed. And the teaching has changed in each of the Protestant churches. So therefore we can say Lutheranism, as it was founded, has failed. Lutheranism, as it has begun, does not exist in the world today. And the same is true of all the false religions. The religions change their teaching, the religions collapse. They don't keep the same teaching, and they collapse. The Catholic Church alone maintains its same teaching, and that's its holiness. And then the argument is, well, what about the Church today of Vatican II? Now, in the Catholic Church today, the bishops of dioceses, the bishops throughout the world, and priests, the majority of them, they don't teach the same as Christ taught. They don't teach the same as our ancestors. This is very similar to many times in the Old Testament, when the majority of Israel went away from God. And the majority of Israel went away from God, and there was no faithful priest in Israel. Another time brought up was that Aaron was the priest. And Aaron built the golden calf and had the people worship the golden calf. And Sam Robert Bellarmine points, even at this time, the priesthood of the Old Testament did not fail, because the sons of Levi refused to participate in the worship of the golden calf. And the sons of Levi were faithful. And the people turned against God, and they worshipped the golden calf. All the 600,000 Jews were in the desert. There was no one that was not there. There wasn't anybody in a far-flung place. They built the golden calf. The golden calf was worshipped, and the vast majority of them worshipped the golden calf. But the sons of Levi said, no, we will not worship the golden calf. And when Moses came down the mountain, he said, who is on the Lord's side? Who has not taken him to this worship? And also say the fathers of the church, many of the people sinned, but they didn't even give up their faith fully. They didn't give up their faith, even though they sinned. Many gave up the sin, and 23,000 were killed in the same day when Moses brought down the justice of God. But the time of Aaron is very similar to the time of us right now. The sons of Archbishop Lefebvre did not worship the golden calf, did not participate in the false worship. The same is true at the time of the Maccabees, when the true priests of the church went and worshipped the false worship, and they brought the false worship into the true temple, which is referred to in sacred scripture as the abomination of desolation. Does this mean the church is defaced? The church has failed? No, it has not. Because when this happened, when Judas Maccabeus, for instance, came on December the 25th, and he purified the temple in 153 AD, the same day that Christ chose to be born, 153 years later, he said, I will not have the temple purified by the priests. There are thousands and thousands of priests. Find me priests who have never participated in the false sacrifice. Find me priests that have never once accepted the false sacrifice, and there were 200 priests found. And the fathers point out that how few there were, because there were thousands and thousands and thousands of priests, but only 200 had not worshipped. Therefore, the church maintained its integrity during this time. The faithful did not fall. Furthermore, we can note that when heresy hits the church, it has many levels, has many different teachings. For instance, in the church today, Vatican II is modernist, the modernist bishops are modernists, the modernist priests are modernists, and they say to us, if you say that these are not Catholics, if you say that they are not holding the true faith, then the church has failed. No, it has not failed. There are still bishops in hiding who maintain the true faith. There are still priests who stand up and maintain the true faith. There are still faithful that assemble together and maintain the true faith and do not kneel before the false worship of the new Mass and do not kneel before the false beliefs of Vatican II. Now let's go to the flip side. What about the Vatican II teachers themselves? One of the arguments of Father Cicada and Father Bishop Sanborn and the principal Sedevacantist is that the new church teaches explicitly and demands that all believe heresy. That there's a binding of heresy upon all the souls in the world. The heresy of ecumenism, the heresy of religious liberty, the heresy of modernism. Let's look at the world around us. Do we find one unified heresy that all the Novus Ordo bishops teach? No, we don't. Some bishops, Novus Ordo bishops, I myself have met about 35 to 40 Novus Ordo bishops. And they don't all have, I found amongst the 35 or 40 that I visited, it was one of my duties before being expelled from the society, was to visit bishops and priests in my last few years before I was expelled in 2012. Novus Ordo bishops and priests. And in my visit of 35 to 40 bishops, I think it was under 40, I was keeping count, but it was under 40, and about 35 bishops. When I met with these 35 different bishops, some in India, some in the Philippines, some in the United States, and those are the main places where I met them. And meeting these bishops, we found that some of them believed the Catholic Church is the true church. Some of them didn't know what they believed, but they did not have a unity of belief. There wasn't a common element. There was not a common element. One bishop that I met told me he firmly believed that the Catholic Church is the true church, outside of which there's no salvation. And yet there are most other bishops believe that there was. Is there a universal teaching of falsity? No, there is not. There is falsity of all type in the modern church. But is there a universal teaching? No, there is not. But what about the fidelity of the teaching of our ancestors remains unchanged. In 2018, we still have Catholics that believe exactly the same as the 12 apostles. They have the same beliefs as Adam did 6,000 years ago. The same beliefs as Abraham. The same beliefs of all the saints of the last 2,000 years. And these teachings are made public. They are not private. They are not secret. And they are the only answer to the crisis of the church. The church has not failed. And the power of the priesthood has not failed. Now, when we consider this power of the priesthood, we wish that all priests would be holy. We wish that all priests would be pleasing to God and live according to their priesthood. But part of the holiness of the priesthood is that even when the priests are wicked, and the priests use their priesthood and their priestly power and dignity in order to spread all manner of evil, including the evil of heresy, that nonetheless God preserves priests to maintain the true faith. And even when the priests are wicked, the majority of the wicked priests do not violate the faith, the majority of them. Even though we find a growth of heresy all throughout the world today. One example in our times, for instance, I myself have noticed in meeting multiple priests of the Novus Ordo, and unfortunately some traditional priests, who have left the priesthood, who are living in sin, who are in their third or fourth marriage, who say they don't believe in God, who say they hate God, and yet they will not break the seal of the confessional. They won't do it. They will not break the seal. They say they don't even believe in God. They don't believe in confession. They don't believe in anything. But they won't break the seal. See, each one of them also, notice that they have something, like Bishop Sheen used to note. I've noticed it myself, all the ones I've met. They have something left over of their priesthood. One priest gave me his Summa Theologica, gave it to me, that he had, when it was time he kept it, but he gave it to me. And it's the one I use now because my original one got burnt up in a fire. So I've got the backup one given me by a priest who left the priesthood. But he kept his breviary. Others kept their rosaries. They kept something of their faith, even though they claim they don't believe in it anymore. This is the power of the holiness of the priesthood. The power of the holiness of the church. So that even though priests can become wicked, and bishops become wicked, and even heretics and turn against God, God will always make sure that there are some faithful priests. Their church never fails. And St. Robert Bellarmine tells us that yes, even though there are times when all the world became Arian, all the world became Arian back in the 300s. But were everyone Arian? No. St. Hilary was not Arian. St. Athanasius was not Arian. And there were still faithful priests hidden throughout the dioceses. And there were still faithful who refused to accept the Arian heresy and never gave in to it and did not bow before God. And there were those before the devil. And there were those who remained perfectly faithful in the essentials of the faith also. There were those who said, I will not go to an Arian church. In Hungary in 1955, 1956, when the communists came in, the Catholic faithful said, I will not go to the Pax priests. In 1965, when the Vatican II started its teaching of heresy, they were faithful throughout the entire world. And priests like Father Hannafin, my pastor, who said, Father Hannafin was not a great theologian. He remember I mentioned many times he didn't believe in dinosaurs. He called them dinosaurs. The dinosaurs didn't exist. Why? Because they're ugly and God didn't make anything as ugly, therefore they don't exist. End of problem of dinosaurs. Didn't believe in dinosaurs. But the fact is, even though he barely passed his theology classes, he had a hard time with Latin. When they brought in the new Mass, I'm not accepting that. And when they started teaching other religions were okay, no. No, my mommy taught me, and I was taught as a child, and I learned in the seminary that Jesus Christ is true God and true man, and that the sacraments will save souls, the true sacraments and the true liturgy, and not this modern garbage. And he and many other priests throughout the entire world stood up. Some great theologians, others very simple priests. The same amongst the faithful, some intelligent and well-read, others very simple. But they stood up for the same faith. And St. Robert Bellarmine says, there have been many times of crisis in the church. Many times. We see it all throughout the Old Testament. Who were the ones who built the false temples? It was the king, the head of the people of God. It was the high priest who made sure that they worshipped the false statue of Antiochus Epiphanes. It was the prophets who taught the people lies and heresies, so much so that God came down and said, there is not one single faithful prophet in all of Israel. One of the quotes that the enemies of God used. And Robert Bellarmine says, no, yes, that's true. There was not one faithful prophet in Israel, but there were faithful prophets in Judah. And at that time, Israel was divided between the 10 tribes and the 2 tribes. The 10 tribes are unfaithful, but the 2 tribes are faithful. And when we say that the church is going to maintain its fidelity, there will maintain its fidelity firstly and primarily in the faith. But secondly, there shall also be at all times Catholics who live that faith. There will not only be in the church those who hold the faith but are sinners, as in mortal sinners, and living enemies of God. At every time in the history of the world, from the time of Adam's sin, even Adam, when he sinned, what did he do immediately after his sin? He repented. What did Eve do immediately after her sin? She repented. And they spent the rest of their lives in penance, so that for a very brief period they were in sin, and they were never in heresy, but they were in sin, and the sin was taken away, so that there will never be a time in the church, and they're both saints in heaven. Adam and Eve's feast is December the 24th. And they're both saints in heaven. Now the fact is that there will always be Catholics who are living faithfully until the end of time. There will be Catholics in the year 2018 found throughout the world, here and there, even though in small numbers, some hidden and unknown in any way. We run across them sometimes in nursing homes. We won't say the names, but we run across them in nursing homes. We run across them in places where there is someone maintaining fidelity and loving God and living in suffering and rejecting the modern heresies and suffering in being abandoned by their families and abandoned by all. But they maintain the faith with charity, and they have a happy heart, and they suffer for Christ right now in 2018. And there are souls that are faithful throughout the whole world. Why? Because the church is holy. When we say the church is holy, it means it has the power to make holiness. Now, if someone has the power to make holiness, but nobody becomes holy, there's something wrong with the machine. If you got a power washer, and you spray it on the wall, and no dirt ever comes off, ever, there's something wrong with the machine. So the Catholic Church is like a power washer. It washes the dirt off the wall. Now, some dirt stays because it resists the power washer. Other dirt must fall. Other dirt must be removed, or else there's something wrong with the power washer. So likewise, in the Catholic Church, the holiness is maintained from the time of Adam until the very ending of the world. And there will always be Catholics living according to the grace of God, even if they are very small in number. And there will always be priests maintaining fidelity, even if they are small in number. It's Catherine Emmerich who said she saw scarcely 200 faithful priests towards the end of the world. All over the world, there's thousands and thousands, over 100,000 priests, thousands and thousands of priests. But there were scarcely 200, the same number that were found faithful in the time of Judas Maccabeus, where all the thousands of priests turned against God, but only 200. And the church will maintain its fidelity. There will be Catholics faithful we find, for instance, in the world today, the fidelity is not only in the old world, not only to be found in Italy, or Germany, or France, or Ireland, or England, in the old world, especially the Catholic countries, but it is found also in the New World, found also in the pagan world. There are faithful Catholics in China, faithful Catholics in India, faithful Catholics in the Philippines, of course it's a Catholic country, faithful Catholics in Korea. There will be faithful Catholics wherever the Catholic Church is. There will be some that maintain fidelity. Not in every individual place, but in every general place. And the fidelity is because the power of the church remains. That the faith is able to wash clean souls. Now, what washes clean souls? The unchanging faith. Not another faith, not a changed faith. The false religions change their faith. The Lutherans believed in real presence, they don't believe it anymore. They believed in priesthood, they don't believe in it really anymore. And they believed in confession, even though they didn't believe it would absolve sins. They don't believe it anymore. The Mormons believed a man must have as many wives as he can get, until the 1925 law said, and it was wrong to have only one wife, until the 1925 law in Utah said it's illegal to have two wives. Then God appeared to the Mormons and said it's okay to have one wife. They adjusted their religion. Make the necessary adjustments. The Orthodox in the Eastern Church, they adjust their religion every time there's a new emperor. And they adjust their religion all the time. And so that we find that all false religions adjust. The liberal of 1965 is now the major conservative of 2018, just in our own church, or those that have taken on the liberalism of Vatican II. The heresies and the wickedness continually changes. It does not maintain its fidelity. It does not maintain that it is the same, except that it's disobedient to God and following Satan, but not the same teachings. The Catholic Church has maintained the same fidelity of teaching, with wicked priests and good priests, wicked faithful and good faithful. But the church will maintain its fidelity, and it is that Sitientes, those who come to me shall thirst, says our Lord, and they shall find the waters. And the waters that give us life are found only in the Holy Roman Catholic Church, which is immutable, not only in the New Testament, but even in the Old. It's the same church. Adam has the same faith that I do. Adam has the same faith that St. Peter II has at the end of the world. Adam was the head of the same church to which we belong. And we are not only the physical children of Adam and Eve, we are also the spiritual children of Adam and Eve. We believe what they believe. We know that there is a daughter of Eve who shall crush the head of the serpent, and she has. We know that it is the son of Adam who shall be the last pope, and he is not perhaps yet born. We know that there will be faithful Catholics until the ending of time. And not only faithful in the bare minimum of believing the faith, but there shall be saints. There shall be souls that will maintain fidelity in the darkest of times. And so we see all the Jews outside of Israel had turned against God, but not Tobias. And so it is time and time again. And Jonas preached about the destruction of Nineveh, but they repented and it was not destroyed. And the goodness of God always defeats the wickedness of the devil. The holiness of the church always defeats the unholiness of the outside world. And holiness is produced only by the Catholic Church in its faith. In its faith. And that faith must be the same. And if it changes, it's not that faith. And look at the results. As the faith changes, what happens? Souls leave God. Souls leave moral lives. Husbands leave their wives. Wives leave their husbands. Children abandon of God. This is what happens when the church changes its faith and the priesthood changes its way. But God will always make sure that there are some faithful priests and a perseverance and fidelity until the ending of time. The visibility of the church remains. The holiness of the church remains, even if it is very small. And it is not unusual that it be found very small. Many times it has happened in the past. It will happen also again in the time of the Antichrist. And in the time of the Antichrist, there will still be faithful Catholics. There will still be faithful Catholics. There will still be faithful priests. And at that time we know there will be a faithful Pope, St. Peter II. But there will be fidelity until the very end. And therefore the Church of God is unbroken, not only in its faith, but also in its holiness, from the time of Adam's sin until the ending of the world. And so it is, and so it shall be. And these truths remain true at all times, including our times. God bless you all. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen.